Hello, my name is Liam Burns, and the exam question I'm answering is the one about polar climates. So, someone who doesn't know a whole lot about geography may confuse where the Antarctic and the Arctic are. Some may think they're in the same region, the same location. Some may think they're neighbors, or they're in a different location from where they actually are. Some might even not think they exist, but truth be told, they do exist. Antarctica is a continent at the bottom of the Earth, or the South Pole, basically. It's an ice covered landmass virtually uninhabited by humans and terrestrial organisms, except for the various research stations scattered across the continent. Penguins, whales, seals, and many other aquatic animals inhabit this region. It's the fifth largest continent on Earth, and believe it or not, it's actually bigger than Europe. Now, on the other hand, the Arctic is not a continent, it's just a region at the top of the Earth, or the North Pole. Parts of Canada, Finland, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and the United States lay in the Arctic Circle. As opposed to Antarctica, the Arctic is not entirely covered by ice. Both terrestrial and aquatic organisms live there, such as polar bears, walruses, foxes, hares, and more. There's a plethora of research stations governed by many different countries in this region as well. Now you might be asking, why does polar climate change actually matter? Well, first of all, these polar ice sheets not only play major roles in their specific localized climates, but the entire global climate as well. For example, alongside other icy landforms such as icebergs and glaciers is what we call sea ice. Sea ice is found primarily near the poles. Some of it stays year-round, it really just depends on where it's found, but some of it melts and refreezes again in tandem with the seasons. The bright, squinty-eye worthy surface of ice reflects much of the incoming solar radiation from the sun back into the atmosphere, then back into space. And this cools the areas in which there's ice, since it's not absorbed as heat, which would melt the ice. However, because of rising global temperatures rooting from human-made carbon dioxide emissions and other sources of pollution, sea ice is melting at a growing exponential rate, which therefore decreases the amount of incoming solar radiation being reflected back into the atmosphere and space, which therefore increases the amount of solar radiation being absorbed by the ocean, which then heats up the ice. You can see where this is headed. This is an obvious positive feedback loop at play here, and it's imperative that we acknowledge its existence. These changes in the amount of sea ice also affects the global ocean circulation. As we all know, the ocean and its various coinciding temperatures play a major role in controlling the climate everywhere around the globe. Sea ice does a great deal in pushing the salty ocean water underneath itself, which makes it dense and removes it from the surface. This polar water then moves towards the equator, while the warmer water from the equator moves towards the poles. When the amount of sea ice is changing unnaturally, this conveyor belt, as some may call it, is impacted everywhere around the world, not just in one area. Secondly, the receding sea ice is causing a mighty negative impact on the aforementioned ice-inhabiting species of these regions. Polar bears in the Arctic are moving further south inland, or they're starving to death, or both. The migratory patterns of many different animals such as narwhals, wolves, and reindeer are changing at an unforeseen rate. Certain sea ice dependent organisms in and near Antarctica, such as krill, have seen drastic decreases in population size as a result of acidification, decreasing sea ice, and increasing ocean temperatures. The vast majority of certain penguin populations are projected to go extinct by the end of the century alongside other species. This is only scratching the surface. Now you might be wondering, how do these specialized certain areas of the globe experiencing these changes in the climate, how does that affect the entire globe though? Well, that's a good question, because as with many things, the diminishing and changing of wildlife habits and habitats lead to more separate positive feedback loops and domino effects. There's a seemingly endless range of species that depend on those that are affected by a warming climate, including us humans. For example, various communities, big or small, inside or outside of the Arctic and Antarctic circles, are being encroached upon by foreign wildlife and organisms that wouldn't normally be migrating to or inhabiting those areas because they need to survive. Another example is the previously mentioned diminishing krill populations. Many different species from around the globe, such as whales and seals, they depend on these krill to survive, and when they're going away as a result of climate change, the global ecosystem takes a blow, whether indirectly or not. Lastly, and most importantly to us humans, I hope there's no extraterrestrial organisms watching right now, the melting of sea ice and its coinciding effects will inevitably lead to the disastrous downfall of municipalities and communities around the globe. Hundreds, if not thousands, actually. Since the beginning of the 20th century, global sea levels have risen about 7 to 8 inches, and they don't seem to be stopping anytime soon. The areas most vulnerable to being affected by increasing floods and storm surges are small island nations and coastal cities. Many of the inhabitants of these areas may find themselves being forcibly removed from their native homelands to unfamiliar settings and cultures. We're already seeing this in action, folks. For example, the Maldives is an island nation in the Indian Ocean with a population of around 500,000 people and the highest elevation at just around 17 feet. Scientists predict that the entire country will be almost entirely swallowed up by rising sea levels in just 30 years. That's a lot of people, and that's a big problem. There's also an even bigger issue of the economy. Some of the most wealthy cities in the world are situated along ocean coastlines, since these spots allow for the ease of transport of goods and services from one region of the world to the next, among many other things. If these cities are being more and more flooded by incoming ocean waters in the upcoming decades, which would deem some of them inhospitable, that not only means the inexorable migration of millions, maybe even billions of people, but also a ginormous blow to the billions and trillions of dollars being produced and exported from these powerful hubs of human civilization. Notable history is definitely still in the making, despite a lot of what happens today feeling insignificant to what tragedies have happened in the past. But arguably, the biggest modern tragedies are still to come. Anyway, thanks for watching my video, and I hope you learned something new.